Good afternoon and welcome back to another edition of Talk of the Towns. We have a special supervisors edition here. As you know, we've been talking to supervisors across the state on issues that are important to towns. And today we're talking about one of the most important issues that towns are facing, and that's infrastructure redevelopment, infrastructure investment, and particularly when it comes to important resources like fresh, clean water, and of course, making sure we have proper sewage investments as well. We want to make sure the sewage is going the right way and the water is going the other way. But we do have two great guests with us today. Two supervisors from two great towns, each on different sides of the state. So we have a little diversity here. I do want to, before I get to introducing them, just remind you that Talk of the Towns is a podcast that can be found on the Apple platform, Spotify, and if you choose to watch, right on YouTube. And hit like, share, and subscribe. That helps us get the podcast out to more people. Like, share, and subscribe. So today we have two great guests with us, and I'll have them introduce themselves in just a moment. But we are talking about the SWAP program, Sewer Water Action Program. The association has been long advocating for this program. And this is a program that is a little different than the grants that are available. There are a lot of grants available for water and sewer infrastructure investments, but it's a little bit different because grants are usually available for really big projects. And grants are great for getting a lot of money out to a few communities. They're competitive. They do cost. You usually have to invest in grant writing. Usually have to invest in grant administration. And certainly it does leave some communities behind because it is a competitive project or proposal. So with the SWAP program, it's kind of like the CHIPS program that we're proposing, and where there'd be a formula base where the state would every year invest a little bit of money in every community. And we think that gives those communities an opportunity to make proactive investments in their infrastructure going forward. And so with us today to talk about this, I'll start on the east side of the state. We have the supervisor of Bethlehem and Supervisor VanLuven. How are you, Supervisor?
Well, thank you. It's good to be here today.
And also with us on the other side, on the west side of the state, from the great town of Cheektowaga, we have with us Supervisor Nowak. Supervisor, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Good. Let's start, first of all, maybe Supervisor VanLuven, why don't we talk a little bit about your town, and then we'll go to Supervisor Nowak.
Sure. I'm from the town of Bethlehem. We're a community of about 35,000. We're in the Hudson Valley and the Capital Region.
Excellent. Thank you. Supervisor Nowak?
I'm from the town of Cheektowaga, New York. It's a town with over 80,000 residents. Within the town, we have two villages, and we have a sanitary sewer system of around 260 miles of line with nine lift stations and a main pump station.
Wow. So you both have sizable towns and a lot of infrastructure in both towns to deal with, and that's not.
Yeah, I didn't realize you wanted us to talk about the sewer system and the water system right away. So in Bethlehem, we have our own water system. It consists of two well fields and a reservoir. We have two water treatment plants and about 220 miles of water mains. We also have our own wastewater treatment plant. It has about 180 miles of gravity fed and force mains that support it. And every year we deliver about 1.6 billion gallons of clean drinking water and process about 1.6 billion gallons of sewage.
As I said, both have impressive infrastructure systems within your towns, and that's a lot for you folks to take care of. And I congratulate you both because that is not easy. So, in relation to SWAP, I guess let's just jump into it. How would you state, or how would a state dedicated funding stream help you and your town meet maybe some of your infrastructure investment programs? Let's start with Supervisor Nowak, if that's okay.
Sure. In the case of Cheektowaga, like a lot of municipalities, we're facing budget crunches and having to address the tax cap and all sorts of infrastructure related needs. There's like all this stuff is kind of hitting us at the same time. A big advantage of this would be when you're talking grants for infrastructure improvements, you have to spend up front and then get the money back later. or you have to find money for a match. Something like swap would just give us some money to take care of the issues that are coming. I don't want to say no strings attached, but we don't have to worry about fronting the money and getting it back later, and we can put it immediately to work to deal with our needs.
Absolutely. Supervisor?
They the sad reality is that maintaining a water and sewer system is extremely expensive, and with the property tax cap, municipalities are largely smothered in our ability to invest in our infrastructure, whether it is on roads, sidewalks, buildings, or our water and sewer system. And these systems are expensive to maintain and they are aging. And so the need for investment in them is critical. And it's a heavy lift for municipalities to do without a property tax cap. But with the tax cap, we're literally looking at, do we have people or do we have the infrastructure? Because the tax cap doesn't allow both.
That is an excellent point. We've been fighting hard to get infrastructure investments exempt from the tax cap. The legislature hasn't been interested in that yet, but we're continue to fight for that because we think that's important because it is discouraging those investments, unfortunately. And today, even worse, now we have new things we're dealing with, right? That you weren't dealing with maybe 5-10 years ago, that PFAS in the water supply system now needs to be filtered out. Lead pipe abatement that now, we're finding and having to deal with. Do you folks in either of the towns, and anyone can pick it up wherever they like, but have any issues with that or any costs associated with that going forward that you didn't have maybe 5 years ago?
Yeah, but I'm going to go with a third challenge that we're seeing, and we're seeing in Bethlehem, and it's happening throughout New York State, and that's climate change. And the way that is manifesting is that it has changed the growing season. And last winter or last fall, we had an algae bloom in our reservoir at a time of year where we've never ever had algae blooms before, and the result was that our water treatment system was able to take out the algae, no problem, but it was releasing a harmless chemical that were very sensitive to smelling. And so we had about 4 months of musty smelling water in town. And to deal with that, we have had to introduce new water treatment processes that are more similar to what you see in more southerly states like Virginia and Maryland, because that's what our climate is turning into. So not only do we need to be investing in maintaining the distribution system, not only do we need to be investing to address lead challenges and emerging contaminants like PFAS, but we need to be adapting our system to deal with problems that we never had to deal with before, like musty smelling water from algae blooms.
Mm.
Thinking about some of the challenges we have on sewer infrastructure specifically, if you can think of a technology outside of wood lines, wood pipes, any sewer technology besides that is in the town of Cheektowaga. We have subdivisions that were built in each decade of the 20th century. And we obviously have our challenges with sanitary sewers, and we've been doing a lot of relining, we're dealing with inflow and infiltration, all sorts of other things. But the challenges of Erie County and in the state even, there are the town's challenges too. When you get to lead and water lines, the county water authority is working in one of my villages right now, addressing those issues. And when you get to things like the treatment of wastewater, the town of Cheektowaga was in the wastewater treatment business many years ago. We got out of that in the late 1970s and made an arrangement with the Buffalo Sewer Authority. So BSA has its own issues and concerns, but Cheektowaga's fate is tied to those directly. That if their costs go up, we're going to absorb some of them. And it's not just my town; it's another town here in Erie County that has to deal with those same challenges. But yeah, we have our own challenges as the town of Cheektowaga. But what's going on with the city of Buffalo or Erie County directly impact us, and our people have to deal with those concerns as well.
It's funny, on the sewer end of things, I've actually had conversations where some lawmakers didn't realize that PFAS is an issue for sewer discharge as well. And I had to explain, what goes in the body that is a forever chemical sometimes comes out, and it is a problem. It just goes right back into the cycle. And so, people think, oh, PFAS is just a water supply issue, but it's actually a wastewater issue as well.
Right.
So, one of the things that we've been talking about is investments in the infrastructure. And NIOT did a great paper this past August. I don't know if you've seen it. I'll send it to you folks if you don't already have it. But it's the SWAP paper, a call for dedicated state funding stream for municipal water infrastructure. It's done by our research team, August 2025. And what they found, and I just like to get your kind of reaction to this because it's really, I think, eye-opening. But what they found is the federal government has indicated that 80% of all New York State water infrastructure, specifically drinking water, stormwater, and sanitary sewer, is in dire need of repair, replacement, or rehabilitation. What the DEC found in 2008, now think about that, that's almost 20 years ago. DEC found in 2028 that they estimated that there's a $36 billion need to repair municipal wastewater infrastructure. And the Department of Health in that same year, 2008, said there was a $39 billion need to upgrade drinking water infrastructure across the state. Now, that is 20 years ago, and not a lot has been done on a proactive matter. So a couple of things. First, your reaction to that. And then second, just to talk about maybe the age of your infrastructure. I know Supervisor Nowak, you just kind of got into it a little bit, but first your reaction to that and maybe how that relates to the age of your infrastructure.
Brian, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll touch on it and maybe we can go back and forth a little bit with this. As I mentioned earlier, that we have subdivisions all throughout the town of Cheektowaga that were built in different decades. And some of our older neighborhoods, we've been able to touch on those, especially on storm drainage, but we've done relining for our sanitary sewers too. And we've got more work to do in that regard. But just thinking about some of our newer neighborhoods, and by newer, I mean 1970s, 1980s that were built, and the storm drainage that's over in those areas is reaching end of life. We have storm drainage that is going back to the subdivisions right after World War II that we have delayed the work we need to do, not on replacing those storm sewers. They're talking to us, so to speak. And it's hard to quantify dollar amounts, but Cheektowaga is not alone in this position to where we can very easily put up, just for the sake of argument, a $20 million bond and not make a big dent to things we need to do. I think about rural areas, about how they don't have a tax base and they have significant infrastructure. And then you have situations like the large cities that they have the population, they don't necessarily have the tax base either for different reasons. It's just everybody's got a different challenge to deal with the same issue.
Yeah, I think that's well put. I think though, and to build on that, as we're looking at the challenge of the cost of upgrading the investments, one of the challenges that I have seen over the last 10, 15 years when I've really been focusing on this is that the cost of the challenge is so astronomical that I think a lot of our state decision makers just kind of shut down on it and are like, it's so big, we're going to put our money over here into these things that are smaller challenges, and we can get the results that we want. When what we need to be doing, I believe, is to be if we have a huge challenge that we need to meet, we need to start working on it now. And we work on it with the resources that we have available. In Bethlehem, we've been investing an average of $1 to $2.5 million a year in proactive water infrastructure work because we have to. We've been investing strategically in our water, in our sewers system as well. And then the stormwater system is one of the big unspoken challenges that municipalities deal with, and it's expensive. But we need to start working on it now. We can't keep kicking the can down the road, which is what we've been doing for the last 40 years. And it's time to stop kicking the can and start getting to work. But we need state support to help us move that forward. You know, our municipal systems were really built, at least in Bethlehem, which is more of a rural suburban community, were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s with a lot of funding from the federal government, and that money is gone now. And so it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah,
That's
and going back to the funding piece of this, with when you get into municipal budgets, one of the first things that people look to keep the tax rates down or to make cuts, you cut the things that nobody looks at. Nobody's going to say we're going to slash the police budget 10%, or the youth and the parks programs, we're going to deal with those, and we're not going to fund those anymore. You fund the proactive down the road capital maintenance, or you defund your engineering department a little bit, or you pull a little bit of money back from highway departments and things like that. That tends to be the pattern. So you don't have the capital set aside to do the proactive work on this infrastructure improvement and repair and even the maintenance. So a lot of what, in my opinion, is happening is reactive. And I think you're getting to an even worse position than reactive, where it's absolute emergency, to where it's some of the stuff is aging so much that you have folks in your engineering departments or highway departments or DPWs or what have you, approaching elected officials and saying, you know, we're out of time entirely. We have to do this particular repair or correction yesterday. There's no time to even be reactive anymore, certainly not proactive with the repair. And that stuff is going to start compounding for sanitary systems and all of these infrastructure related repairs.
Those are great points. I think, absolutely, when you look at these numbers that were put out 20 years ago, almost, with the, 36 billion by one, 39 billion by the other, that is overwhelming, and it almost is paralyzing to policymakers who, by the way, don't have a lot of revenue. We're seeing a difficult year coming up. I think Supervisor VanLuven, you made a great point that, these systems are primarily built on federal dollars. Most towns got 90 cents on the dollar back in the day, back when they had that money available. All gone, all gone. And then, of course, you have competing interests at the state level where, they're looking at things like education and social services and healthcare and all these things that are every day right in front of their face. And although everybody knows clean water is critically important, unfortunately, the pipes are underground, and so they tend not to look at those as they do other issues. And that's an issue we have to, maybe, as you say, bring to the state and have them really wake up to that.
And it's going to be, it's a challenging point to bring to them, because when you invest in a road, everyone can see it. They can see the improvement, and everyone and the state electeds who helped make it possible can go out and have a photo op with it and pat themselves on the back, and everyone cheers. And with our water and sewer infrastructure, most people don't even think about it existing. And so when you're fixing it, and when our state leaders give us resources to help us invest in that, they don't have something that they can stand on and show people. You've got a trench, or you've got a filled in hole. And we're asking for support to do what's right, as opposed to do what's politically beneficial. And so that, for a lot of our electeds, that's a powerful motivating factor. They want to do what's right. For others, it's a heavier lift, because they can put the money somewhere else and gain more political capital from it. And I realize that's a cynical way to look at things, but I think that's kind of the political reality we live in.
Certainly is the truth. We were talking about federal money coming into the sewer systems. That was absolutely the case for the town of Cheektowaga. We consolidated sewer districts back in the late 1990s, and one of our lawmakers at the time was handing out brochures to simplify the explanation for it. And he said something, the brochures at the time said something upwards of 80% or more of the money that came in was federal related. So a lot of federal money that went into our wastewater plant initially and into our sanitary sewer system. But even in the last 5 to 6 years, the American Rescue funding that came through the municipalities, I know the town of Cheektowaga put a considerable share of its $26 million we received to sewer repairs, both on the storm side and relating to our sanitary sewer district to make upgrades, repairs, improvements. And without that, we would have been even further behind the 8 ball. So the story of federal money doesn't just go back many years. It's present right now.
So you're both telling the story of the stress that towns are facing, and we know it and we see it. But in this paper that I just talked about, we published in August, you can start to see the stress starting to come out in the numbers, in the data. So, first of all, to frame it, 51% of our towns across the state have some sort of water expenditure, water system expenditure, either a plant or distribution system or something. 37% for sanitary sewer. But when we look at spending in 2011, towns spent $375 million on their water system, just their water system, $375 million. By 2023, that rose to $670 million, an almost 80% increase in that time in spending on water infrastructure. Towns in 2023 spent $291 million on sewer, which is 15% increase over the last 12 years. So we're seeing the patterns. We're seeing that more and more. Obviously, some of that is cost increase and we haven't gotten into that yet, what's happening with cost of buying the infrastructure and everything that needs to go along with that. But a lot of that is that towns are at a breaking point where they need to start investing more and more in their infrastructure. And what's happening, as we just talked about, is being pushed more and more onto the local government away from federal and state government. We can see that in the numbers.
We can, and an additional factor in that cost increase is that state and federal health experts have been modifying the allowable standards for a variety of things that can be in the water. And as those numbers change, as those thresholds come down, we have to modify our treatment system to accommodate them. And we're 100% in support of that. If the health studies are indicating that we need to have a particular chemical below a certain level in our water supply, we will do everything we can to meet that. And often we're required to meet that. But for example, the town of Bethlehem was having a challenge, has had a challenge over the years with some of the chlorine byproducts that can form. And we're required by federal law to have chlorine in our water supply because it keeps out Giardia and Cryptosporidium, and it was critical to eliminating cholera from our communities. But that chlorine, when it's in the pipes, can have reactions and create chemicals that we don't want. And we had to invest $18 million in modifying our treatment system. And we're constantly making adjustments to our water system in order to keep the levels of that below the federal thresholds. And those thresholds are right, but they come with a cost. And I'm not always convinced that we're recognizing those costs when we're setting those thresholds. Or recognizing that in order to meet them, it requires us to be investing, and that investment requires investment by the state and the federal government.
Supervisor VanLuven mentioned climate change near the beginning of this conversation, and that's something to keep in mind with the water systems and all the infrastructure that's running underneath the streets into everybody's homes. That when you have a dry season, you get next to no rain, and that soil dries up. Part of what keeps those water lines maintained well is pressure on them. So if you have expansion and contraction, you're going to have more of these water line breaks. And here in Erie County, our water authority was doing. There's news stories this year about significant water line breakages, and it was related to exactly that.
Yeah, we're seeing the water main breaks in the in the summer much more than we did in the past. In the past, it was more in the winter when you had the freeze and the thaw, and that wet dry cycle. It's a reality.
Right.
So let's explore that for a minute, because when I was supervisor, I talked to our DPW commissioner or water superintendent, and they talked about if we could just proactively go out and change these water mains proactively, because we know they're aging, we can put them on a schedule, and if we do that, it's a lot cheaper than if we waited for the emergency to happen and then have to go out in the middle of the night and all this other stuff with all the labor, and it's 3-4 times more expensive very often for the emergency to take hold. Do you guys have any thoughts on that or any experiences with that?
Yeah, I would say on the proactive side, you got to triage certain things. My town, towards the city of Buffalo border, we have 30-foot wide lots. The homes are real close together. They tend to be older. On the opposite end of the town, uh, the lots are wider, the homes are further apart, the infrastructure is newer. So when you look through your entire system, if you have an older portion of it and a newer portion, we've got sanitary sewer lines that are running underneath uh, residents' garages between
Mm.
their homes and the backyards. Most places, those run underneath the street. But in a situation like that, you need to keep a close eye on that portion of the system. And if you have a problem, you deal with it right away. That's right at the top of your list because doing something proactively is going to be significantly less expensive. If you have an emergency break, you have to tear down someone's garage, for instance, it's a whole different headache than just digging up the street. You know?
That's a headache, no doubt.
Yeah, and I feel for your wastewater division having to deal with situations like that. We don't have any of our sewer or water mains running under people's houses, thank heavens. Our system is newer. It really started coming together in the 30s and 40s is when our system started going in. So we're not dealing with a lot of that really old infrastructure like Brian and his team are. In terms of costs, we talk about that a lot in the context of road maintenance because it's a lot cheaper to go in and mill and repave a road while the road bed is still good than to have to go in and rebuild the entire road. Talking to my Commissioner of Public Works, the parallel doesn't work quite the same when we're talking about our water and sewer infrastructure. And that's because when we have a water main break, say on a street, we don't go in and replace the entire main on the street. We go in and we do a repair on that stretch of broken pipe. And that's costly, but we don't go in and replace the entire thing. I think the challenge or the way I would characterize it in Bethlehem, at least, is that the question is, when do you go in and fix the whole pipe, or do you just eventually have the whole pipe be a series of repairs? And what are the pros and cons of that? Doing the sewer main maintenance is much more straightforward because you can do this injection of plastic pipe. It's lining while the pipes are in place and it doesn't require the digging. Water mains, you got to dig it up, you got to replace it, and it's expensive. We figure usually about $200 to $250 a foot for water main work, and that adds up really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we talked about earlier, revenue streams, right? Really, if we know the costs are shifting to the towns, the town really just has its levy in most cases, most communities across the state. Have you guys applied for grants for this kind of stuff in the past? There's a whole like alphabet soup of different grants out there with WIA and CFAs and all of that kind of stuff. And if you have applied for grants, what has been your experience with that?
We have steadily, we apply for grants every year. We never let an opportunity go by. We've received a couple for when we had to put in an $18 million improvement into one of our water treatment plants. We were able to land a $3 million grant. But we got that because we were under a federal consent order, but we still had to come up with 15 million on our own. We recently got a $280,000 grant for source water protection for land protection, which was great. But for the most part, we put in every year for funding for proactive infrastructure work, and we get zero every single year. And my understanding is that's because the state is understandably investing in municipalities whose water systems are in crisis and are in complete failure. And so municipalities like the town of Bethlehem that are looking to proactively avoid going into crisis get nothing.
Yeah, I'd say for the town of Cheektowaga, we received considerable grant funding and zero interest loans through New York State through different programs to support our sanitary sewer system, and that's helped us line our entire system in terms of the mains. Without that funding, it would not have been possible. We're under a DEC consent order here in the town of Cheektowaga, and without the American Rescue funding, we wouldn't have been able to begin the work related to one of the stages related to that was sewer laterals. We have to deal with inflow and infiltration with I&I with our system, and if we didn't have support from New York, we wouldn't be able to do that. My experience with the grants in my time as supervisor has been one of finding them cumbersome at their worst. Obviously thankful for them, but it requires a lot of documentation and a lot of administration to make sure that we get back every dollar that we're entitled to. And I understand that. If the state's going to give you, say, $5 million to improve sanitary sewer system, they want some information about what you did, and you got to cross every box that they ask you to cross.
So each of you dedicate employees to this grant writing and administration, or is that done out of house, or how's that done?
In Cheektowaga, it's mostly in-house. We do retain a grant writer, and he has done great work for us with sewer-related grants specifically.
Our public works staff and engineering team write the grants internally. We don't have a grant writer.
Well, that's great. How many employees in Bethlehem?
We have working on water and sewer issues.
Well,
Or
let's
total?
take total and then working on the water and sewer.
We have about 224 full-time and up to maybe another 180, 200 to 240 part-time and seasonal. Working on water and sewer, our team's probably around 40 people full-time.
40 people. Wow. Wow.
Cheektowaga is a town where around 440 full-time employees. We have our own dispatch office, police department. We run our own sanitation district, so there's about 40 employees there. Highway department is 60 people. In terms of the work on the sewers, I'd say around 24 full-timers in some degree or form are touching sanitary sewers.
Wow. You both have very sizable towns and lucky to have great staff. What we run into very often, as you know, many of the towns in New York are smaller and have much fewer people, and they have a hard time with that grant administration, that grant writing, grant sourcing. So they usually have to do it out of house, but then when they do that, there's a cost involved with that as well. And so it's tough. And then you look at, so one of the things we looked at in this paper we just talked about that we published in August is where's the money going, right? So we looked at all of them, but CFA, we've been told by our state legislators, is really the great opportunity. And we looked at the CFA funding, and going back, say 2019 here, only 15% of the funding went to the towns of the entire CFA pie that went out. 19% in 2021, 3% of the funding in 2022, and 5% in 2023. But what struck me was the CFAs is supposed to be one of the great opportunities for local governments. In those same years, in 2019, 57% of the funding went to what they call other, not a municipal government, not a county, not a city, not a village, and not a town. And that trend stayed through in 2021, 42%. In 2022, 82% of the CFA funding went to a non-municipal government. And again, 82% in 2023. So when we look at that, what do we make of that? I mean, how do we address the need to have these funds sent to municipal government when we see in the CFA process, one of the signature grant programs, we're really not seeing towns considered very often.
Do we know what that 87% is going to?
It's identified as other, so it's non-municipal government. It's nonprofits, it's arts and culture, it's other projects within community. So CFAs anyone can apply to. So it's not just in the situation where the town is competing with a village and a county and and a city, but we're competing with all sorts of community projects, hospitals, and whatnot. So, it just kind of highlights that when the legislature says, hey, you have the CFA process, are we not, I'm just wondering, are we not competitive, or is, what's going on there? Because we seem to be getting such a small piece of that pie fairly consistently.
Yeah, I would wonder, I mean, if any share of that is going to public authorities as part of that other, but I'm assuming that that is included with governmental in some manner or form.
Yes.
Um, I, I don't have a clear answer for that right
Yeah.
this second. It's like, I don't know if it's a matter of that not being top priority. It get even at the state level or the federal level, you know, it's any of us politicians or lawmakers, the path of least resistance is to say, hey, I put a playground in your neighborhood, vote for me in 2 years. You know, it's unfortunately there's a certain political reality with that. I mean, my personal experience has been one of thinking, I'm 38 years old, I'm going to live in this town in 40 years. And if I don't do anything about the sewer system now, I'm going to literally live to see it and regret it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I suspect a lot of it is the glitz factor. I think everyone will acknowledge that wastewater treatment is very, very important, but it's not a great soundbite to talk about sewage. And and whereas it's a great soundbite to talk about a new X-ray machine in a hospital, or as Brian noted, a new playground. And all three are very important. But I think one of the reasons that I really like the New York Association of Towns drive for the swap funding is that it takes that glitz factor out, and it recognizes that we need to be investing in our municipal infrastructure health, just like physically we need to be investing in our bone health and our muscle health. We can't see those bones, but we've got to have them, and they need to be strong. And we need to invest in them, even if they don't look as good as a new suit. And so the swap approach takes out the glitz and allows us to get down to business to actually deliver products that will keep our municipalities healthy and our residents healthy and safe.
I love that analogy. That's perfect. I love that. So in the swap program, we've talked a little bit about it here today. You know, we brought this forward, and when we brought it forward, we felt we needed to be responsible and identify how much we wanted for the program. And as we talked to lawmakers about, well, this is a new program, how much would we put towards it? Of course, they all said they don't have any new money, which I agree. I understand 100%. So we kind of came in with a small ask of $100 million statewide. Now, we understand that's not nearly enough to deal with everything we need to do, but we really thought that that was an easier kind of ask. The other thing we did was attach it to the new $100 million that's coming in the short-term rental bill that they just signed into law, and that's new state revenue coming in. So we figured we had a credit coming in, and we can put a debit against that. But the criticism we received from the assembly in particular is that that's so little money that it's not going to do any good. So we're not even going to bother with it. And so, we felt like we're in a no-win situation. You ask for too much money, they can't afford it. Too little money, they say it's not worth it. What do you guys think about, we've asked our members repeatedly and we've gotten really good responses to this. What could you do? Would you support swap even with initial modest funding to begin with? And what could you do with $20,000 to $30,000 a year in proactive spending?
I know exactly what I'm going to do. So Brian, I'm going to let you go first.
Yeah, see, we compared it to CHIPS funding, and Town of Cheektowaga has over 700 streets that we have to maintain in some manner or form. 1 year of CHIPS funding isn't going to help us repave the entire town. It's not going to do a significant portion even, but it helps. And it's the same thing if we did swap in terms of our storm sewers, let's say. That helps us make some progress on improving storm receivers, and it might be seen by some as a drop in the bucket, but I'm never going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. $20,000-$30,000 coming in, you can make real quality of life improvements for folks in a certain neighborhood, and it might not be glamorous or far reaching, so to speak, but if you have that money coming in year after year, you can make progress on these storm receivers little by little. In 10 years out, 15 years out, you have quality progress to point to say, look, this is a steady stream of income that has come in. We've prevented the worst from happening on this street and in this neighborhood and in this area. And I would support that. Obviously, I like to see the dollar amount be larger, but beggars can't be choosers.
Right.
I The state legislators who are saying it's a drop in the bucket are right when we're talking about it in the context of doing proactive, say, water main replacement, where you've got, $25,000 to get us 100 feet. But water systems have a lot of other components to them that are important. For example, in the town of Bethlehem, our water system supports 1,980 fire hydrants. Those fire hydrants are critical for fire safety, to support the 5 fire departments that we have in the town of Bethlehem. We could use a portion of those revenues to be investing in the testing and upkeep and repair of fire hydrants so that when there's a fire, there is water available to fight it. The other direction that I would take those funds, if they were to become available, is that the federal government is requiring us to replace lead service lines that go into homes. And the town is responsible for the portion that goes from the water main to the edge of the property, but from the edge of the property into the house is the responsibility of the property owner. And replacing that service line can cost around $4,000, which isn't a lot from a municipal standpoint, but for a homeowner, that's a big chunk of money. And we would be, if we could, it's been shown in some of the municipalities that doing a grant program like this, we would be able to use those funds for when we identify a lead service line, we would be able to go in and use those funds to replace that line to keep that family and their children safe.
Excellent. That's an excellent use of that fund. I mean, that's wonderful. The last item I want to just kind of touch on, because it is such a crisis in the state. We all know it. You probably see it in your community, is affordable housing. And, the governor has an aggressive initiative to try to build more housing, try to bring more housing into communities. Obviously, one of the most important precursors to that is infrastructure, particularly water and sewer. Many towns that want to try to achieve that can't, because they just don't have the infrastructure built out. I think that, can maybe talk a little bit about how you see a program like this helping with that infrastructure once it's there, maintaining it, or when it's finally dedicated back to the town, and see if that can be helpful in that, in at least trying to get more housing built.
That's a really powerful angle to be bringing to the discussion, and I think that New York Association of Towns is smart in raising and connecting the two issues. For the town of Bethlehem, we have sufficient supply to support affordable housing construction in town. We have sufficient capacity in our stormwater or in our wastewater plant to handle affordable housing, what it would add to the system. But we need resources to expand the system to support that housing, and then to maintain it once it goes in. And so I think that would be a strong incentive for Bethlehem as we're looking at providing housing, or private developers providing housing opportunities, and us providing the infrastructure to support them.
Yeah, in the town of Cheektowaga, we're in the redevelopment phase. So when we're looking at the housing situation, we may be looking at an old retail or commercial property that we're repurposing for apartments. And you're obviously going to have to take a look at the sewer system and all the infrastructure that is related to that property for making sure that it meets the needs. In certain situations, it absolutely will. In others, you're going to have to upgrade some things, maybe make pipes a little wider, maybe add certain things to get that all to work out. But Cheektowaga is not in a place where we're putting a bunch of brand new homes online or anything like that. We are redeveloping in areas where the sewer system is probably approaching 100 years old. So this would be this type of funding would be a wonderful opportunity for that.
Gentlemen, this has been great, very engaging, a super important topic for towns and the state of New York. I like to say that state of New York sometimes looks at us coming to them asking for things like AIM and CHIPS and now SWAP. They look at it as giving municipalities money, and I've always tried to reframe that with them a little bit and saying, you know what? Your investment in our infrastructure is an investment in the state of New York, because it is where everything comes from. It's economic development, it's public safety, it's clean water, It's going to facilitate affordable housing being built. It's really the state, it's not really money they're giving to the municipality. It's an investment in the infrastructure. The municipality just happens to be the caretaker of that infrastructure, but it's state infrastructure. And so we hope to reframe that argument going forward for the legislators. Any thoughts on that at all? How we can maybe do more to get them to see that point of view?
I like that point of view. I agree with it wholeheartedly. The other side of it that I see as well is that what clean drinking water and efficient cleaning of sewage and responsible management of stormwater, those aren't partisan issues. Those are issues that Republicans and Democrats and independents alike all agree are important, and we can all pull in the same direction. So as we're watching the federal chaos that's going on right now with bipartisanship, this is a topic where I think everyone can get in the boat and row in the same direction. And if we can get the state legislators to row with us, we would welcome the help.
You know, my town is just a few miles away from one of the largest sources of fresh water in the world. And you think about migration patterns over the next generation or two, people are going to come to Western New York. They're going to come into New York State, generally speaking. And we need that infrastructure, not just sewers and water systems and all that, but the electrical grid, any energy for all of this stuff to be ready for an influx of people. You know, the city of Buffalo had one of the largest populations in the United States several decades ago. I don't think it's crazy to think that in 20, 30, 40 years down the road that that population can swell again. And if it does, that's going to pour over into first ring suburbs like the town of Cheektowaga and other places.
It's 100% accurate. I fully agree. The exodus of businesses from drought-starved regions of the United States into New York and the Northeast where there's water it's going to happen. And we can position ourselves to benefit from it, or we can watch other states reap the benefits.
Mhm.
Excellent points. This has been really, really engaging. As I said, you guys have been great guests. I appreciate it so much. For our viewers and listeners, as we started with, please, just a reminder, you can find us on Apple platform, you can find us on YouTube, you can find us on Spotify. Please hit like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you're getting this out to your colleagues across the towns of New York State, because we're talking about these important issues, and we have great guests like the two supervisors we've had here today. Gentlemen, is there anything that we didn't hit on or anything that you would like to add to the conversation?
I think we covered just about everything I was hoping to cover, but just to reiterate, these water systems, the sanitary sewers, the storm sewers, it's all getting older and older every day. You know, the Buffalo, Western New York area, we have some of the oldest housing stock in the country, and you know, everything underground reflects that too. So for state lawmakers, I know they're aware of that, but everybody's got to work together to make sure we're getting the resources we need to really take care of this infrastructure and maintain and replace as we need and be proactive as much as we could with it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that can happen when you're working locally is we can become very focused on the challenges that we have in our municipality and our fight to try to resolve those challenges. And it's really beneficial to have a group like the New York Association of Towns to connect us between municipalities to see that the challenges that we're seeing in the Hudson Valley are the same as those that we're seeing in Western New York and Long Island. And by bringing us together, we can find common solutions and we can fight for common resources to benefit everyone. So Chris, I just want to thank you and your amazing team for the great work you're doing for us.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. We have a phenomenal team. There's no question about it. And I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And I appreciate your time here today. And I appreciate all you do for your communities, the leadership you have in your communities and collectively in the state of New York. As I said, I've been in your shoes before. I did this job. I know what it takes. I know how hard you guys work. And we appreciate that. So anything we can do from our perspective, please make sure you reach out and let us know, because we're here for our members, and we thank you for all you do. And thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It was good to meet you, Brian.
Hey, nice to meet you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.